Please welcome Angela Jansen, who will be sharing with us reflections of her time in Ferguson.
Good morning. I've got some slides of some pictures that I took and then some other pictures that I found to illustrate some things that are happening in Ferguson. I'd like to share them with you. And Greg's going to be, are you going to be, so then I'll just like that. So in August of this year, Michael Brown was shot and killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. And his body lay in the street for 4.5 hours. On a Saturday afternoon. So all of his neighbors, his family, had to walk by his body as they were going about their business. Now, unfortunately, this isn't an odd event. A black man is killed by police every 28 hours in the United States. So since then, over 100 young black men have been killed by police. This is just an example of some of them. John Crawford picked up a toy gun in the Walmart and was shot and killed. Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old with a toy gun out under a gazebo next to a community center, shot and killed by the police. Darian Hunt in Salt Lake City had a fake katana sword right after a Comic-Con convention, and he was killed by police. These happened in Ohio and Utah, which are open carry states, which means you're allowed to walk around with guns. Everyone knows about Eric Garner, who was put in the illegal chokehold, and Akai Gurley, unarmed man walking in the projects coming down the steps, and a police officer was startled and shot him right through the heart. So Michael Brown being killed and even his body laying there, no ambulance being called, isn't unusual. But what is unusual, and the reason people know about Ferguson, is because what the community did. They had a vigil, and they got together, and they've been having a vigil and a rally every single day since then. Every day, every night, they go to the police department. Now, unfortunately, when they did this, the police reacted. Here's more of the protest. And the clergy, there's a UU up there on the left. The clergy comes, right? So you've got young, old, men, women, black, white. The clergy from all different faiths are with them almost on a daily basis in front of the police department, downtown. And what they're saying is, like, this isn't right, and there's no more business as usual. Unfortunately, the police have all this riot gear from the Pentagon. So this is a small police department of about 55 people. And they weren't trained, they were just given something that you'd see someone wearing in the Middle East, an armored tank. And so they came out and they met this grieving community in riot gear, and then with tear gas and arrests. And fortunately, because of social media and live streaming, the rest of the world was able to see this. And the people in Ferguson decided that that wasn't going to deter them. And so they're still coming together and they're still meeting. And in October, and then arrest. And this is Hetty. She's a concentration camp survivor from Poland who was arrested for, there was a law that you have to keep moving. You can't stand still for longer than 5 seconds. Which has since been taken off the books. So she was arrested. And, but the world sees this. And in October, they sent out a request. Support, come to Ferguson, join with us for a weekend of resistance. And fortunately for me, because I travel to the East Coast a lot, I was able to change my ticket and go to Ferguson for this weekend. So I'm not standing here as an expert on African Americans or on police brutality or militarization of the police, but I'm really grateful that that I'm able to just kind of share with you my experiences in Ferguson. So the weekend, there were events all weekend long, potlucks and workshops and panels, and I'm just going to show you a few of the events. Where Mike Brown lay in the street for 4.5 hours, the community has created a memorial. And this is a street that's used every day by lots of people. And down the center of the street, they've got flowers and candles, and it's maintained. It's been run over twice, but they keep building it. And there's a memorial on the side. And there are Tibetan prayer flags with children wrote messages on the flags. And if you see there, this was the Friday night that I was there, and hundreds of people gathered at the memorial. And there's a flag that's upside down. Now, an upside down flag is a sign of distress. So what these activists are saying is we are in distress. The next day, over 4,000 people gathered in downtown St. Louis for a rally and a march. And I love St. Louis, and because you see this arch, you just turn a corner and you've got this beautiful arch. And thousands of people protested. And you see all different groups. That was a huge puppet that the activists made of Michael Brown, his hands up. And UUs were represented. There were about 100 standing on the side of love from all over. I was the only one from California, but Jim Scott there, who was here last week, was from the East Coast, so we felt like we had a nice representation of America. And it was an organized event. The police stayed out of the way. They actually blocked streets. It was a permitted event, and it was very successful. Then that night, there was, this is on Sunday night, there was a mass meeting with the keynote speaker, Cornel West, who's an activist, he's a professor, he's an intellectual, and it was an interfaith group. And what they did is St. Louis University allowed us to use Chavez Arena, which is their sports arena. It's a 10,000-seat arena. And they opened up the concession stands. There were no police around. And these women, I don't know if you can see them standing there, they were greeters. And there's one in a standing on the side of love shirt. And they were spaced out about every 5 feet. And just as you walked into the building, they would look you in the eye and say, "Thank you for coming. We so appreciate you being here." And they'd hug you. So it was an evening of community. And there were probably about 3,000 people. If you look at the stage, this is from my seat, so you can see there was live music, so it was celebratory. And there's clergy from every different faith denomination, including a British humanist. And they would get up and they would speak. And they had 2 of the youth activists who were going to speak at the end. And my favorite, and these are preachers, so they know how to preach. They can spend 5 minutes and get you so motivated and so inspired. And my favorite was Reverend Renita Marie Lampkin. She's been on the front line. That's her with the bandana. She's been on the front line since the beginning. She is the pastor at the St. John's AME Church in St. Charles. And she gave this great talk about how when you're pregnant, which I wasn't really attached to at the beginning, but when you're really excited, then your baby starts to move and you get uncomfortable. And then your baby starts crying, and it's the best sound in the world until it's been going on for a few months. And she kind of used that as an analogy to talk about the young people that go out in front of the police department in Ferguson every single night. And she said, our children are crying. And the reason they're crying is they're sick of poor schools and bad policing policies and economic oppression. They are sick, and the whole damn system is guilty as hell, which is one of the chants. And and she said, so the police are saying, "Oh, I'll give you something to cry about." And she said, but these are our children. And they're making us uncomfortable because they're not doing things the way we did them, right? They're being more disruptive. But they are our children, and what do you say when someone else tries to discipline your child, right? She says, we need to be out with them every night, arm in arm. So when she was done speaking, the president of the NAACP got up there. And there's some controversy about him because the NAACP didn't support the protesters in the way they thought they should be protesting. The protesters called for a change in McCullough, who's the DA, the Attorney General, because he actually works for an organization that was raising money for Darren Wilson before Darren Wilson was charged with anything. And the NAACP didn't back them. So when the president of the NAACP got up to speak, several of the youth that were in the audience got up and turned their backs, which is the first time I saw how powerful turning your back is. And a man said, you're not standing for us. We're not going to stand here for you. And they left, and they just walked out of this huge auditorium quietly. And one of the reverends, Reverend Siku, who's from Boston, who's been in Ferguson, followed him out and brought him back in, and they went to the stage. And when they brought him back in, everybody in the audience spontaneously started pounding our feet and saying, let them speak, let them speak. And they changed the whole format of the evening. And the woman MC said, this is what democracy looks like. Sorry, clergy that didn't get to speak, but we're going to bring the youth leaders up. And they came up and they spoke really eloquently about exactly what Reverend Renita said, how they're tired of being harassed and they're tired of being judged for walking down the street. They're tired of being frisked on their way home from school every night. And they're tired of not getting any support. So then when Cornel West got up to speak, you see the demographics of who's on the stage, because the clergy got up and left the room, and the youth came up, and he stood up, and he's the keynote speaker, I am not here to speak, I am here to get arrested. And that was all he said. And when he was done, a young woman came up, and she said, it's really great that you all are here right now in this auditorium listening to us and standing by us, but it does us no good. If you really support us, meet us in the streets. Don't go back to your hotel, which is exactly what I was planning on doing. Meet us in the streets and stand arm in arm with us tonight. Come out. So I said, okay. And me and about 1,000 other people all met in the Shaw neighborhood. This is us all kind of milling around, not knowing what was going on, not knowing what was going to happen that night, just knowing that we were asked to be there. And they split us into 2 groups, and they moved us in opposite directions. And it's really important when you're at a protest to have buddies, to have people you know that you can look out for each other. So the people that I hung out with was Pachenka, who's the lady on the end. She's 77 years old, was wearing these really high boots. And we wandered for hours following the youth leaders. And the fellow in the back in the hat is Reese. He's a veteran for peace in St. Louis, and these are both local St. Louis, and those other 2 people we were kind of hanging with. And so we kind of kept track with each other. And we're wandering around St. Louis. It's midnight now, and they're telling us, be quiet, stay on the sidewalk, no chanting, which if you're an activist, no chanting, what? But we listened to them, and when people talked, and the young people said, be silent, we were. And finally we gathered together with the other group, and we came together, and we were all crossing a bridge. And there was a high jersey wall on one side, and we're on the sidewalk quietly, and then we stop. And I'm back in the back, and I have no idea why. And there's a YouTube video, which isn't going to play on here, but what was happening at the front, and all we could hear was this. And what this picture shows, if you can see it, is there are riot police. And police in full riot gear came, and they did what's called kettling. They blocked us, and we're on a sidewalk with a jersey wall. They blocked us and then came around and blocked if we had tried to go anywhere. They totally blocked us, and they stood there for 15 minutes just banging their batons against their shields and on the ground in this rhythmic. And this YouTube video, which isn't going to work, shows these young pastors at the front, and nobody had name tags on, nobody had badges on, and they're pleading, could you please just let us speak to someone? Are you in charge? Like, who's in charge here? And they stood there and intimidated. We were in the back. People were saying we're going to get tear gas, but we didn't know. But they intimidated the leaders, and then finally let us go. So we continued walking. I'm not really sure exactly how that happened. We continued walking, and we came upon St. Louis University, which is a Jesuit university in downtown St. Louis, and it's got gates and it's got big walls. And one of the protesters, it was a student there, so he showed his ID badge to the guard on duty and said, these are my guests. And the security guard opened the gate and let all 1,000 of us in. And so this is the clock tower in the center of campus. By now it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning. We were greeted by a few hundred students who'd been waiting for us at the gate, just waiting for us to come in. And this was set up to be an occupation of St. Louis University. And the organizers wanted to remind SLU of their Jesuit values and the fact that they're in this little gated, beautiful community just a few blocks away from some of the poorest, most vulnerable neighborhoods in St. Louis. So we cheered, we got to chant and sing, and then they said, this is an occupation, settle down. And about 30 people stayed, and the rest of us left. And they occupied St. Louis Unit. So all of these machinations was to get those 30 people onto the campus in a peaceful and safe manner. And they stayed for a week, and they had discussions with students, with the faculty, with the administration. And some people were irritated, right? Because it's their study week, so they're actually they're out of class. So there was a great time to actually communicate. And it was Columbus Day, so to occupy a land that is not yours is a great thing to do on Columbus Day. And at the end of the week, the administration and the leaders, and there were all these different. It's not just people talk about Occupy Wall Street being leaderless. It's not. It's just there are lots of people, and there are all these different organizations. So these 5 different organizations came together with the administration, and they received a written statement saying that they were going to expand their African American studies. And the dean is going to appoint a liaison for diversity. and that they were going to go out into the community, which was right outside their gates, and do some work in the community. And after a week, they packed up their tents and they left after lots of conversations with students and faculty. So it was a really uplifting, really fabulous time. And I got on my plane and I came back to Laguna Beach and I kept watching. Well, meanwhile, there is a grand jury that was out to see whether to charge Darren Wilson. I forgot to mention earlier, so a grand jury, 11 times out of, I think, 633,000 times do they choose not to indict. And those are usually police officers, because the prosecutors work very closely with the police. And in this case, as I mentioned earlier, there was video evidence of police riding up and within 3 seconds of arriving, shooting and killing Samir Rice, say, or John Crawford, and the grand jury decides not to indict. So I came back to Laguna, and we're waiting for the grand jury announcement. And nobody knows when it's going to be. It's going to happen by January. It must happen. And there were leaks, and then if you go in November, on a Monday, on a random Monday, Governor Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency. And nothing was happening. And the protesters were still, the activists were still out every night in front of the police department. But nothing had happened to make him declare, federal law. They brought in the National Guard. On Tuesday, 2 Apache helicopters landed in downtown St. Louis. So I thought, okay, it's going to happen. And the school board had asked for them not to make the announcement until after the school buses drop the kids off. So if you're going to make an announcement, just wait until the school buses bring the kids home in case there's widespread panic or disruption. And so I was able to go to St. Louis that weekend. And I thought it was going to happen on Friday, and it didn't happen until Monday. But once again, there were all kinds of activities during the weekend. If you go to the next slide, Emerson Unitarian Church every Saturday morning holds a vigil outside America's largest strip mall. And they were out there in the rain. They're out there this said they were out there yesterday, so I was able to join them with the big Standing on the Side of Love banner, and about 1,000 cars go by in the time that they're there on this corner. It's really heavily traveled. And it was 10 to 1, people beeping their horns and cheering, and every now and then someone who wasn't really happy that we were standing out there, that we had a sign that said Black Lives Matter, would say something. And then Sunday night, excuse me, I participated in my first act of civil disobedience. We gathered together in the Shaw neighborhood again. And what we did, there were a few hundred of us, and we blocked intersections, which is knowingly violating the law. You're not allowed to block the intersection. But it's really well organized, and it was a Sunday evening, so there wasn't a lot of traffic. So you form a circle, shoulder to shoulder, so you have to have a lot of people. And what we did is we blocked 4 intersections for 4.5 minutes each, in recognition of the 4.5 hours that Mike Brown's body lay in the street. And the St. Louis police saw what we were doing, and they actually moved ahead and blocked cars so that cars wouldn't kind of get stuck in that region between us blocking the traffic and the traffic behind. So it's been my experience, when the police behave in a kind and calm and professional manner, the protesters behave in a nice, calm, kind manner, and things don't escalate. So Monday afternoon, the grand jury announced that they'd reached an idea about the indictment. And for some reason, the powers that be waited until 9 o'clock at night to let us know. Now, there had been leaks the whole time, so we knew, right? We knew that there was not going to be an indictment, but we hoped that maybe something was going to happen. So this is Ferguson Police Department. And it's a bit surreal because they were decorated for the holidays. So there's that big season's greetings, and there are the police in riot gear. And there's another picture from the other side where the police are under it. And so I went there. There were over 1,000 people, and we're waiting. We're waiting because at first they said it was going to be at 7, then 8, then 9. And so the police in riot gear are standing there, and I wanted to get close and take a look at them because I've seen these pictures of them, but I'd never seen them up close. So I took this picture. So that's how far away. And I feel for them because they must be really uncomfortable because they're in this gear of like an occupying force, right, in their town where they work every single day. And so they were just stoically looking ahead, and people in the crowd were yelling just awful things at them, right, because they've got so much anger and rage. And then somebody threw a water bottle which bounced off. Now, that was good, though, but that wasn't that. And so I left, and then I don't even know what happened, but suddenly all the police ran and hid behind the car. And one of them, you see, he's grabbing his gun. And you've got 1,000 civilians, like, wandering in front. And these guys are so scared. They're so scared. It's a frightening situation. And again, this is a situation that the people that live in Ferguson are dealing with every single day. And I'm dropping in, and then I'm coming back to Laguna Beach, where if I don't wear a protest shirt, nobody knows I'm a protester. I'm a middle-aged white woman, right? But these people can't take off their skin, and they can't take off the neighborhood they live in, where these are the cops that are pulling them over in their cars. So we all gather together. This is Alexis. She's one of the young leaders, and she's actually standing on someone's car, some silly person that left their car on the street. And Mike Brown's mom came right after I took this picture, and his stepdad, and they stood there and we listened for the whole 15 minutes it took McCullough to prevaricate and explain and defend, until finally, after 15 minutes, there's not going to be any indictment on any charges. And everyone was shocked, and I was shocked. And I don't understand why we were shocked, but we thought maybe there'd be some justice. And Mike Brown's mom, she just broke down, like she was just sobbing. And his stepdad was just angry, and he was yelling. And then he scooped her off, and they ran. And they ran this way, and then some people were like, we're marching, and a group of people marched that way, and other people said, I'm sick of marching, we're here. And so I'm standing here, and the people that my buddy system, they decided to go downtown St. Louis, where the government buildings are, where there were very few protesters, but that's where the National Guard were, protecting the government buildings downtown. So then I hear the police saying, this is an unlawful assembly. Get out of the street, you'll be arrested. And then I hear them saying, stop trying to flip over that police car. And I saw the YouTube video, they were trying to flip over a police car. But I decided to head towards that for some reason. I decided to go down to see what was going on instead of heading to my car, which is the opposite direction. And I saw there's a table that somebody had thrown through a window. Somebody just picked it up and broke the window. And then I saw this in the air, and I had the absurd thought that somebody had created fireworks. Like, hey, there's going to be fireworks. Everyone's going to calm down. They're going to breathe. And it was tear gas, which I learned quickly enough. And so tear gas, it makes you want to gag and cry and curl up and run all at the same time. And so we ran. It's a great dispersal technique. And now the people wearing gas masks earlier don't look so funny. So I ran. And a group of us ran behind the police station, but they had it cordoned off. And we said, okay, sorry, we're trying to get out of here. And there's a big crevasse, so we can't go. And the police are like, you have to go back into that. And I'm like, but there's tear gas there. And he said, sorry, I really don't have a lot of compassion for you right now. And I said, well, you don't have to have compassion. I have compassion for you. I understand what's going on, that you're stuck here. But can't you just escort us across? Like, we're asking you to protect and serve. And he just looked at me, and we just stared at each other. And then we had to head back here into the tear gas. And we're just trying to find a way out and around. We end up at this tiny little house that's off by itself. And we're running towards it. The door opens, and this woman, Marie, says, quick, come inside. And these are these people, they're white, they're in their 60s. They're not activists. I don't even think they like the activists. And the woman said that she was really frightened when she saw all of us, and it happened to be me and a bunch of black men, for some reason, running towards them. And she said at first she was like, lock the door. But she could tell that we were in distress. And so she opened it up and invited us in, and they brought out all their towels and buckets of water. And were really, really very kind to us because she saw we needed help. And so the world saw this, right? And all across the world, in Madrid, Barcelona, London, they shut down Oxford Street in protest of Black Lives Matter and police brutality in the United States. A group of people from Chicago and Ferguson went to the United Nations in Geneva and talked in front of the torture committee about what was going on. And this is in Santa Ana. Reverend Kent helped organize this prayer vigil and march in downtown Santa Ana. And there we are with our banners, about half of us, I think, reuse. And so at one of the events that I was at, Michael McPherson, who's an African-American man who's in charge of the Veterans for Peace, he said, White people, we're okay. Yeah, you all need to talk to each other about what's going on. And so I really appreciate you allowing me, Greg did this, so I think I've gone a bit long, I'm sorry, allowing me to talk to you and to share my story with you. And if you feel moved to get more involved, as was said during the announcements, there's going to be a vigil in March tomorrow night at the Anaheim UU, and also right here at Tapestry, Jan and I are going to facilitate a book discussion about the new Jim Crow. And this Michelle Alexander goes through and sets up exactly how the system was created to subdue and subjugate vulnerable people, especially people of color. And if you believe that, if you don't believe that, if you want to argue about it, if you want to discuss it, please buy the book from a local independent bookseller or the library, or if you must, Amazon, and join us. The first discussion group is going to be the 15th of February at 11:30. So thank you so much for letting me share my story. I appreciate it.